Hello, my dear sleepy listener. Tonight, you drift back to a time of emperors, mosaics, and the soft lapping of the Bosphorus against marble shores. It's the year 330 CE, and the old Roman world is bending, reshaping itself like wax near a flame. But there, just east of the ancient Aegean, something glows anew. You stand in the fresh morning light, in the bustling heart of a rising city. It is called Nova Roma, New Rome, but already people are whispering another name, Constantinople. You're here as the city is born, not from brick and mortar alone, but from the vision of an emperor whose dreams stretch far beyond the worn stones of Italy. Constantine the Great, ruler of the known world, has turned his gaze eastward, and so, tonight, have you. Before you drift away into peaceful slumber, please take a moment to like this video, leave a gentle comment about your favourite historical moment, and subscribe to keep these soothing tales coming your way. Let me know where you're listening from and what time your eyes begin to flutter closed. Now, dim the lights, settle in, and let these gentle whispers of history lull you into sleep. You awaken on a gentle slope that overlooks the sea, the air warm and clear. The hills around you are scattered with freshly carved stone blocks, scaffolding, and linen-draped workers resting in the shade. The city is still in its infancy, half Roman, half Byzantine, all potential. Across the water, the horizon gleams. Sailboats drift lazily past, their sails reflecting the morning light like prayer flags. To the west, memories of old Rome still linger: the Senate, the legions, the crumbling pantheon of gods now being gently folded into the fabric of something newer. Constantine walks through the construction with slow, thoughtful steps. You don't speak to him. Of course you're simply here, observing from the gentle shadows of the colonnade. But you notice how his eyes follow the rising basilicas, the half-built aqueducts, the fountains not yet flowing. He sees more than stone, he sees destiny. One historically confirmed moment anchors this vision on May 11, 330 CE. Constantine formally inaugurates this new capital. It's a city that blends east and west, Roman and Greek, pagan and Christian. Constantine doesn't call it an empire's second chapter, but we will, many centuries from now. Some say he saw it in a dream. Others suggest he simply needed a fresh start, somewhere away from Rome's creeping chaos. Scholars still debate just how much of Constantinople's grandeur was truly planned by Constantine, and how much unfolded long after he was gone. Like a garden he merely planted, trusting others to tend it. You wander past a small chapel where a quiet cleric scribbles verses from the Book of Psalms with a feathered quill. The air smells of damp ink and olive oil. Behind him, a rough fresco shows Christ with his hand raised in peace. The figure's proportions are strange, the eyes too wide, the background oddly flat, but there's something comforting in its simplicity. A flock of white doves takes off from the nearby arch. Their wings slice through the silence with only the faintest sound, and then, a soft moment, a child, dusty from play, offers a fig to one of the masons. The man grins, accepts it, and returns to chipping away at the stones destined to shape a new empire. You're not sure why that gesture lingers with you, it just does. Maybe because it's quiet, human, real. The light shifts. The sun descends toward the Marmara Sea, casting long shadows through the half-built domes and courtyards. You sit on a wide marble step and let the hush of history settle around you like a blanket. It's not just stone being set here, it's centuries of faith, struggle, splendour, and survival. Already, you feel that. Not just the sounds of chisels and carts, but the faint echoes of chants, of bells not yet cast, of battles not yet fought, of saints not yet born. The empire will endure longer than any kingdom west of it, and yet in this moment it is simply beginning. You close your eyes as twilight deepens. Somewhere far behind you, a church bell rings, though no church yet stands. It's only in your imagination, or perhaps a whisper from the future. You wake again to the hush of morning fog curling through stone-paved streets. The scent of sea salt and incense lingers in the air as you rise from a shaded colonnade nestled beneath a row of cypress trees. The city around you has changed quietly, almost politely. It is larger now, fuller, its mosaics more brilliant, its rooftops more varied, its people more certain that this is the true centre of the world. Theodosius is emperor now, a man of resolve, but not of spectacle. You catch glimpses of him in public courtyards, not draped in lavish gold, but seated plainly with scribes and bishops. His presence is steady, like the carved foundations of the city walls rising behind him. He rules not with flourish, but with faith. In fact, you've noticed more and more churches appearing small at first, tucked between bathhouses and old Roman temples, but now unmistakable. The city hums with Christianity, yet not all the old gods have faded. In back-alley niches and crumbling arcades, you see weather-worn statues of Jupiter, Apollo, and Minerva, some still decorated with fresh garlands. A grandmother mutters a prayer to both Christ and Artemis. You smile. Transition isn't always a clean line, it's often a soft blur. Theodosius issues an edict. Pagan practices are no longer to be tolerated. The temples are to be shuttered. Sacrifices ended. The empire is to be Christian now, by law and by heart. Some obey, others quietly resist. Historians still puzzle over how deeply these changes took root. Were hearts converted or merely customs? Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. Perhaps it doesn't matter, only that the current shifted. One thing is certain: in 395 CE, Theodosius dies, and for the last time, the Roman Empire is whole. Upon his death, the empire is split permanently between his two sons, Honorius in the west, Arcadius in the east. You stand beneath a cypress as this divide takes shape, not with fanfare, but with soft administrative scrolls, distant military postings, and the quiet sobs of those who realize unity may never return. You stroll along the Golden Horn, the harbour bustling with life. Fishermen haul in their morning catch. A seller offers honey-soaked pastries from a lacquered tray. Children run past you, one holding a painted wooden hoop. The world feels ordinary, even gentle, until you look past the shoreline to the future. The West will crumble, piece by piece. But here, in Constantinople, there is staying power. There is something else, something Eastern, forming in the shadow of Rome. A particularly human moment catches your attention. A tired monk dozing off at his desk in the patriarchal library. His parchment curls beneath his elbow. His ink has dribbled across the page, forming a lopsided cross. You don't disturb him. Sleep, after all, is holy in its own way. You visit the Forum of Theodosius, marvelling at its orderly colonnades and triumphal column. A spiral of sculpted stone climbs the pillar, retelling battles and victories in a soft, unhurried swirl. A man nearby reads the story aloud to a small group of children, pointing with a fig branch. The words fade as a soft breeze carries dust from distant roads into the capital, and through all this the forums, the churches, the slow construction of something grander than Rome, you notice the city's strange stillness. Unlike the fevered pulse of the old capital, Constantinople moves like a tide, slow, inevitable, subtle. You feel it beneath your feet. You hear it in the lapping of the waves. You see it in the measured steps of court scribes, the silent prayers of bishops, the guarded glances between Roman senators who now live far from Rome. Some wonder, is this the Roman Empire still, or is it something else entirely, waiting for a name? Even today, scholars debate exactly when the Byzantine Empire truly began. Was it Constantine Theodosius, or not until much later, when Latin fades and Greek rises? But tonight, you don't worry about labels. You simply walk the streets, observing layers of history forming like fresco upon fresco. And as the moonlight glints off the polished dome of a new cathedral still damp with rain, you sense that the heart of the empire has not died. It has only moved. You settle on a stone bench, warmed by the memory of sun. The night is cool but forgiving. Somewhere nearby, someone plays a slow melody on a bowed lyre. You listen, eyes half closed, and feel the past stretch gently forward like a winding road in mist. You awaken beneath the soft hush of early dawn, where the skyline of Constantinople sits like a low prayer against the sea. The air feels different, lighter somehow, but behind the stillness, something has shifted. The world has grown quieter in one direction and more complicated in the other. It is now the early 5th century. The Western Roman Empire, once the master of the Mediterranean, is no longer the centre it once claimed to be. You hear rumours drifting in with traders, barbarians crossing rivers, cities left abandoned, Rome sacked not once, but more than once. And yet here, in the east, the streets are still swept, the libraries still open, the sermons still rising like soft incense smoke into the rafters of churches. You find yourself walking the length of the Mace, Constantinople's main avenue. The city is confident now, not boastful, just sure of itself. The palaces are well tended, the aqueducts carry fresh water, the grain ships arrive mostly on time. While the West shrinks into legend, the East has learned how to endure. And enduring, as it turns out, is a skill, a discipline, one cultivated carefully under a new emperor, Theodosius II. You see him only in portraits and distant processions. His rule is quiet, cautious, guided largely by advisors and his remarkable sister, Pulcheria. She is a presence behind the curtain, formidable, pious, revered. Theodosius II is best remembered not for his conquests, but for a book of laws. You hold a worn copy of it in the scriptorium one sleepy afternoon, the Codex Theodosianus. It's heavy, both in weight and intention. A collection of imperial decrees meant to order the tangled life of an empire. You run your fingers across the inked Latin letters and imagine the scribes who copied it line by line, candle by candle, across 1,000 nights like this one. Not all is order, of course. There are cracks forming just faint ones. The Huns stir in the north, and in 447 the city faces one of its greatest threats. An earthquake strikes, toppling a large section of the mighty Theodosian walls. For a brief moment, Constantinople is exposed. But then something remarkable happens in 60 days. The people rebuild them. Civilians, soldiers, monks, everyone lends a hand. You watch them work from the shade of a nearby fig tree. Their fingers are blistered, their robes dust-covered, but their pace is constant, like a heartbeat. Historians still debate just how quickly the walls were repaired. 60 days may be legend or close to it, but what matters is the spirit behind the story when threatened. Constantinople doesn't panic, it builds. You walk to a market square where storytellers gather by torchlight. One tells of Attila the Hun, the scourge of God, who rampages across Europe like a thunderstorm. But here, he never breaches the walls. You sip warm goat's milk from a clay cup and listen as the flames flicker in the wind. A quirky little detail sticks with you that night. The Emperor's court once experimented with sending pigeons carrying imperial messages early airmail. It wasn't very successful, but the idea, like so many Byzantine things, was oddly ahead of its time. You imagine a confused pigeon fluttering over the Bosphorus, unsure which palace roof it's supposed to land on. Meanwhile, within the court, theology swirls like steam from a bathhouse. Councils are called, heresies are named, definitions of Christ's nature human, divine. Both fill parchment after parchment. The debates are fierce, but the voice is rarely raised. Even arguments here are conducted with scholarly precision, like fencing with feathers and Pulcheria. She eventually becomes Augusta, ruling in her own right for a time. You see her in a mosaic calm eyes, thin halo, hand lifted in silent command. The city respects her, so do you. As twilight falls, you visit the harbour again. Ships bob gently, their masts creaking like lullabies. A young clerk hums to himself while counting amphorae stacked along the dock. The scent of fish, salt, and crushed bay leaves hangs in the air. You sit on a worn crate, pull your cloak tighter, and listen to the shifting rhythm of the water. Byzantium, you realise, is not just surviving, it's evolving. It's becoming something neither entirely Roman nor fully something else. It is its own creature, now slender and complex, layered like a palimpsest, rewriting itself while still holding the traces of old ink. The West fades into memory, but here the candles are still burning. You awaken beneath the great shadow of a wall so vast, so solid, that it seems to grow from the earth itself. The early morning is quiet, but around you there is a gentle bustle, merchants setting up stalls, priests murmuring prayers, sentries stretching beneath the first amber rays of sun. Above you loom the mighty Theodosian walls, triple-layered and stone-crowned, watching over Constantinople like ancient guardians. It is now the 5th century's waning years, and the city has begun to see itself differently, not merely as the inheritor of Rome's mantle, but as something entirely fortified, both in stone and spirit. You trace your fingers along the cold mortar, still damp from the previous night's sea mist. These walls stretch for miles, protecting not just homes and churches, but memory. As the rest of Europe lies scattered in post-Roman confusion, the Byzantine East has consolidated. At the heart of this stands Constantinople, walled, golden, and quietly alert. You stroll alongside the lower parapet, just as a shipment of limestone blocks is unloaded nearby. Repairs are always ongoing, cracks sealed, mortar replaced, battlements tested. After all, these walls are not just symbols, they are shields, and the world beyond them is stirring. To the north, ominous whispers drift southward. The Huns may have faded, but now the Goths, Slavs, and other peoples of the steppe circle the empire's edges like distant thunderheads. And to the east, the Sasanian Empire watches with interest. You find yourself listening more closely to foreign tongues in the port. There's tension there, unspoken, but palpable. The emperor now is Leo Van, known sometimes as Leo the Thracian, a soldier by background, but no simple brute. You glimpse him during a procession modest, a little stooped, his robe unusually plain. His rise marks something new. The army and its generals are now playing a louder role in imperial decisions. This, too, is a shift. One detail you can't stop thinking about Leo's elevation in 457 CE is the first time an emperor is crowned by the Patriarch of Constantinople, rather than by a military commander or senate. It's subtle, but profound. From now on, the divine right to rule will be wrapped more and more tightly in liturgy and incense. A throne granted, not just by might, but by heaven's murmur. Some historians suggest Leo's choice of Isaurian generals, rather than traditional Roman elites, set the empire on a different path, more provincial, more flexible, but also more fractious. Others argue this was survival, not strategy. Either way, change has arrived. You climb a tower that overlooks the Sea of Marmara. The wind is strong here, tugging at your robes. A passing monk, wrapped in wool, greets you with a soft nod. He's sketching something onto parchment, an unusual bird he saw that morning. You glance at the drawing. It's shaped like a peacock, but with the face of a lion. You blink. He grins. Symbolism, he whispers. Later, in the quiet sanctuary of a domed chapel near the forum, you observe a curious little interaction, a boy lighting a candle too tall for his reach. His father lifts him with a grunt, and together they set the taper into its holder. The flame flickers, then steadies. You think, not for the first time, that Byzantium itself feels like that child reaching towards something beyond itself, held aloft by generations of hands. The wall beside the chapel bears an inscription: in war, faith, in peace, vigilance. You smile. It suits the place. And yet, vigilance is tiring. Even here, even now, the empire feels the pull of future storms. Military spending grows. Bureaucracy thickens. Ambitious generals with names like Zeno and Basilicas maneuver behind the curtains. You hear their voices at night, faint arguments drifting from the palace complex as if from another world. It's not all weighty matters, though. A little quirk from this period makes you chuckle during Leo's reign. Constantinople briefly tried importing circus elephants from India, hoping to reintroduce grander Roman spectacles, but the creatures, unused to the narrow streets and incense-rich air, refused to perform. One reportedly sat down in the middle of the Hippodrome and wouldn't budge for 3 days. Even in its most imperial moments, the city has a way of humbling itself. Or perhaps the elephants simply knew better. You descend from the city walls and walk toward the bustling food market near the Strategion. Fresh herbs, honeyed dates, and grilled fish fill the air with warmth as the sun dips low, painting the marble facades in soft gold. You sip from a clay cup of spiced wine and close your eyes. You're safe behind these walls, for now. You awaken to the sound of distant drums and muffled cheers. The morning light filters through high-arched windows, dancing on stone floors polished smooth by centuries of feet. You're inside the Hippodrome of Constantinople, part sports arena, part political theatre, part seething cauldron of emotion. The year is 532 CE. And the empire sits under the rule of Emperor Justinian the Great, a name you'll hear echo through many centuries. For now, though, he is just a figure in a gilded box, seated beside his wife. the formidable Theodora. She wears a robe of purple so rich it seems to shimmer even in shadow. The Hippodrome is overflowing, blues on one side, greens on the other, rival factions more like political parties than mere sporting clubs. Their banners whip in the wind, their chants are half prayer, half threat. You sit high in the stands, far from the frenzy, watching as the horses line up for the next chariot race. But beneath the roar and spectacle, something tense coils through the city. It begins subtly, a scuffle near the lower gate. Then a chant, different this time, angrier, deeper. You hear the word Nika victory, but the tone is wrong, urgent, furious. By noon, you're back on the streets. The city is in chaos. Rioters swarm the forums, light fires near the Senate House. The blues and greens, usually at each other's throats, have united for once against the emperor. The reasons are many taxes, corruption, heavy-handed justice, but none of that matters in the moment. Constantinople burns. This is the Nika riots, one of the most violent and dramatic civil uprisings in Byzantine history. For 5 days, the city teeters. Half the city is set alight. The newly built Hagia Sophia, Justinian's architectural jewel, is reduced to charred rubble. You find yourself standing behind a row of frightened shopkeepers. Smoke curls from the rooftops, and broken tiles litter the streets like seashells after a storm. From a high perch, you hear whispered arguments inside the palace. Some suggest the emperor flee, but Theodora, regal and unflinching, reportedly declares she would rather die in purple than live in exile. You picture her saying it softly, with that calm certainty some women carry like armour. Historians still debate how accurate her speech was or whether it happened at all, but the story remains, and its resonance has outlived even the marble palaces that surrounded it. In a sudden shift, Justinian acts, loyal generals, including the fierce Belisarius, are dispatched. A trap is set. Tens of thousands of rioters are lured back into the Hippodrome, and then the gates are closed. The bloodshed is swift, merciless. Some say 30,000 died in a single day. You do not go to the arena. You do not need to see it. You simply feel the heaviness that follows a strange silence that spreads through the city like ash. Later, you pass workers sweeping debris from the old square and overhear a child asking, why was the city angry? His mother pauses, then says, because it forgot to rest. You wonder what she means by that, but the words stay with you. In the weeks that follow, the rebuilding begins. Justinian is not cowed by the violence. If anything, it strengthens his resolve. He commissions a new Hagia Sophia grander than any structure the empire has seen. You watch its foundations laid beneath the eyes of Anthemios and Isidore, two architects who speak more in numbers than words. A quirky touch from the records the builders used bricks marked property of the emperor to discourage theft. You find one of these bricks later, half buried in dust. The inscription is crooked. The emperor, it seems, trusted masonry more than handwriting. Construction moves with urgency. Within just 5 years, the new Hagia Sophia rises from the ashes, its dome so wide and seemingly weightless that visitors will later call it a miracle. You enter one morning as it nears completion. The smell of plaster and incense fills the air. Light pours through 40 windows that ring the base of the dome, making it seem to float. You tilt your head back slowly, and for a moment, you forget the city ever burned. Scholars still puzzle over how the dome was built. Was it structural genius or divine luck? And how did it survive for so long in an earthquake-prone region? Questions like these drift through the centuries, unanswered but unforgotten. You step out into the square once more. The city has changed, not destroyed, reborn. As Byzantium often is, you awaken to the sound of distant bells, slow, sombre and deliberate. A gentle fog drapes the city, turning the familiar outlines of domes and towers into ghostly silhouettes. The marble beneath your feet feels cool, damp with the moisture of the early morning. Constantinople is hushed, not with peace, but with caution. The year is now 542 CE. You walk beneath scaffolding near the rising dome of the Hagia Sophia, where the final decorative touches are being laid with delicate care. Gold tesserae glint in the weak sunlight. The structure is nearly complete, a triumph of Justinian's vision, proof that this city rises from ash. And yet, in the streets below, a different kind of shadow has begun to spread. You hear whispers at the market stalls: illness, coughing, fevers, death. At first, it seems distant, a problem for port cities further south, but soon it finds its way here, one by one. Doors are marked, curtains drawn. You pass through neighbourhoods where shutters are closed in the middle of the day. This is the Justinianic plague, one of history's first great pandemics, sweeping through the Eastern Roman Empire with a force that few could have imagined. Constantinople is its heart. Some say tens of thousands die each week. You sit in the shade of a fig tree and watch funeral carts roll past, their wheels muffled by straw on the cobblestones. Even the priests now pray from behind cloth veils. And yet, the city breathes on. In one quarter, you find a woman hanging bunches of lavender and rue above her doorway, whispering that the scent will keep the illness away. In another, a scholar debates whether the plague is divine punishment or a test of endurance. Historians still debate its true cause. Was it Yersinia pestis, the same bacterium that would later bring the Black Death, or something else? The records are murky, like the Bosphorus on a moonless night. Justinian himself falls ill. For days, the city holds its breath. You sit with others on the steps of the baths of Zeuxippus, silently waiting for word. Then, somehow, he recovers. He emerges thinner, weaker, but no less determined. To some, it is a miracle. To others, a warning. Amid the sorrow, life continues. You visit a monastery garden tended by a single monk who insists the plants must still be watered, even when no one comes to see them. He shows you a bush of rosemary he's been cultivating for years, its scent sharp and clean. A quiet defiance against the miasma in the air. And in a dark corner of the city, beside the harbour, you find a boy carving patterns into the wooden railing of a ship with a small knife. He doesn't speak, but later you see the boat depart, bearing bundles of cloth and amphorae. Of oil trade continues. The empire endures. Amid all this, Justinian continues his grand project, the reconquest of the old Roman West. You hear of his general Belisarius, returning from campaigns in North Africa and Italy. Victories, yes, but at great cost. Ravenna, Carthage, Rome itself all reclaimed for a time. Yet the toll is heavy, and the cities themselves often too broken to rejoice. You read letters carried by messengers, accounts of triumph tangled with grief. The West is not what it was. Some scholars argue Justinian's reconquest overextended the empire, draining it of strength it could not afford to lose. Others admire the ambition, a final flicker of the old Roman fire. You remain undecided. You only know that the triumphal arches built to celebrate these victories feel a little too quiet, a little too solemn. A quirky moment sticks with you, a government edict declaring price caps on funeral services. With so many deaths, unscrupulous undertakers had begun charging extravagant rates. The emperor responded by fixing the price of a shroud, as if bureaucracy could soften grief. As evening descends, you stand again beneath the newly gilded dome of Hagia Sophia. This time, it is complete. You walk across the marble floor, light dancing from gold to shadow as candle flames flicker high above. The building hums not with voices, but with space itself. A monument not to certainty, but to endurance. You sit in the narthex and rest your eyes. A soft breeze moves through the arched doorway behind you. The scent of myrrh and damp stone fills your lungs. You're not sure how long you sit there. Perhaps an hour, perhaps longer. But when you rise, the city is still standing, diminished, yes, haunted by silence, yes, but still standing. You awaken to the distant rhythm of footsteps on stone, steady and synchronized. The air is sharper now, crisp and tinged with the smell of tanned leather, bronze oil, and iron dust. Outside your chamber, the empire is stirring with new energy. There's movement in the provinces, whispers of conquests retold in low voices over wine and bread. The plague may have passed, but the scars remain on faces, in ledgers, in the thinness of city crowds. And yet, Justinian presses forward. His vision of a reassembled Roman world has not dimmed. In fact, it has grown more ambitious. You hear his generals' names spoken like incantations: Belisarius, Narcissus, men of action, strategy, and unshakable loyalty. You stand on the deck of a Byzantine galley, gliding through the Aegean. Your eyes sweep across rows of soldiers polished like statues in the sun, sails stretched taut, white and full of wind. Ahead lies North Africa, where the Vandal kingdom once thought strong will crumble in a matter of weeks. Belisarius's campaign is swift, tactical, and nearly bloodless. Some call it a miracle. Others call it a well-timed gamble. Back in Constantinople, victory is celebrated with restraint. Justinian, after all, sees this not as conquest, but as restoration. He does not redraw the map, he merely re-inks the old lines. You hold one of these maps late one evening in the Imperial Library, watching as a scribe slowly fills the Mediterranean with purple once more. Rome, Carthage, Ravenna, they are marked again with tiny imperial eagles. It feels fragile, this ambition, like painting gold over cracks. Then comes Italy. You journey there in spirit, through reports and tales. Belisarius marches on Rome, then Ravenna. Gothic resistance is fierce, and the campaign stretches across 2 decades, with victories often undone by the next campaign season. Still, progress is made. You picture Belisarius modest, brilliant, loyal to a fault riding beneath stone arches on a weary horse. He is the last Roman general, some will say, and perhaps he is. At his height, he captures more land than any commander since the fall of the West. At his lowest, he is recalled, briefly disgraced, and then quietly reinstated. His life is a paradox, as is the empire itself. One curious tale floats through taverns and monasteries alike late in life. Belisarius is said to have been blinded and left to beg alms outside the city gates. Give a coin to Belisarius, he supposedly pleads. It is almost certainly untrue, historically unverified, and likely the invention of later dramatists. Yet the story endures, soft as a myth, perhaps because it speaks to the vulnerability of power. Even greatness can be forgotten. Meanwhile, in the eastern reaches of the empire, battles stir once more with Sassanid Persians. You find yourself in Antioch, walking its cool marble colonnades, just before it falls to Khosrow I in 540. The fire comes suddenly, and though the Persians later rebuild part of the city in their own fashion, it feels like a wound reopened. At court, Justinian continues his ceaseless reorganization. He issues more laws, refines tax codes, and debates theology with bishops who arrive at the palace in endless waves. You attend one such debate quietly, from the shadows. The subject, the nature of Christ again, always again. You lose track of the logic, but you remember the tone thoughtful, urgent, like men discussing not ideas but fate. Historians today still wonder about Justinian's motivations. Was he a sincere believer, a control-obsessed bureaucrat, or an emperor haunted by Rome's faded grandeur? Likely, he was all three. And through it all, his city glows. Hagia Sophia gleams with fresh mosaics. Domed churches rise in Anatolia. Aqueducts stretch like veins to distant provinces. There is beauty in this renewal, even if it trembles on the edge of exhaustion. You cross a courtyard near the Augustan and pause to observe a public sculpture recently restored, an old Roman bronze repolished, now bearing the subtly reworked face of Justinian himself. You chuckle softly. Even statues can't escape bureaucracy. As night falls, you pass a public fountain where a scholar reads aloud from the institutes a summary of Justinian's codified laws. A child tugs at her mother's sleeve. "Are those the real laws?" she asks. Her mother nods, though even she seems unsure. For many, law is now an art form elegant, precise, and rarely enforced quite as written. The city rests uneasily beneath the weight of glory. You feel it in the stones. The conquests are vast, yes, but difficult to hold. Each new province must be defended, taxed, understood, and Byzantium is not the empire it once was. It is something else, leaner, cleverer, more fragile. You fall asleep again near the column of Justinian, gazing up at the emperor's statue atop a horse, arm extended. The gesture is commanding, proud, but from where you lie on the stone steps below, it also seems wistful, as if he is reaching for something already slipping away. You awaken inside a quiet chapel, its narrow windows letting in the first tender rays of morning light. The air is cool and smells of wax and ancient wood. A single candle burns beside an icon Christ Pantocrator, his gaze flat and serious, his face surrounded by a golden halo so delicately painted it seems to hover. You are not alone. In the far corner, a monk kneels, whispering a prayer you cannot quite hear. It is now the 8th century. The grandeur of Justinian's empire has receded, like a tide that swelled too high. Gone are the expansive campaigns. Gone, too, is the sense that Byzantium can shape the entire Mediterranean world. In its place, introspection, uncertainty and icons. You sit beside the monk, who does not look up. He's copying a small image, painting slowly onto a wooden panel with pigments ground from stone and herb. Lapis lazuli for the robes, ochre for the skin, gold leaf for the divine. It is painstaking work, done with care more than precision. The monk breathes slowly, as though each brushstroke carries a prayer. Yet outside these chapel walls, controversy brews. A new wave is sweeping through the court and clergy iconoclasm, the destruction of sacred images. Emperor Leo III, a military man with a keen sense for order, has declared war on the images of saints and Christ. He believes their veneration borders too closely on idolatry. Many agree and many don't. In 726, he issues a decree banning icons in churches. You hear it read aloud in a city square, the official's voice shaking only slightly. The reaction is mixed. Some nod, others turn away, grief softening their expressions. In one neighbourhood, a group of women weeps openly as soldiers remove a beloved image of the Virgin Mary from their chapel wall. This is the beginning of a cultural rift that will endure for over a century. You watch as murals are plastered over, icons torn down, and mosaics scraped from sacred walls. At night, some monks bury their paintings in clay jars, hoping to preserve them for another age. You stumble across one such effort, a cache hidden beneath a floorboard in a monastery kitchen. The images are wrapped in linen, fragile but alive. Historians still debate why iconoclasm arose. Was it a response to military failure, a way to centralize imperial control, or was it genuinely religious, an honest concern about the blurring lines between symbol and object? The sources are unclear. Motives blur with the passage of time. You wander the outer cloisters of a monastery near the Sea of Marmara, where the monks have responded in silence. They no longer paint. Their chapel is bare, save for simple crosses scratched into stone. One monk gently explains what is eternal cannot fade. He says it as if comforting himself. Not all obey, of course. In distant provinces, resistance grows. In Italy, the Pope refuses to comply. The divide between Eastern and Western Christianity deepens, not with violence, but with disapproval and a growing sense of otherness. You attend a quiet mass in a rural church near Thessaloniki, where a hidden icon is brought out only after the doors are locked. It is old, worn, nearly flaking, but the congregants gaze at it like an old friend. Back in Constantinople, Emperor Constantine V continues his father's iconoclast policies with even greater zeal. He holds councils, enforces laws, and ensures the army remains loyal. You pass an officer's quarters where frescoes once adorned the walls, now smooth and bare. But time does strange things. In secret corners, icons continue to be made small ones, tucked into prayer books or painted on the inside of sandals. A merchant shows you one, the Virgin cradling the infant Christ, painted on a walnut shell and sealed with resin. It's not an image. He winks. It's a memory. One quirky detail stays with you to discourage secret painting. Iconoclast officials reportedly began inspecting ink shipments for suspicious pigment orders, especially ultramarine blue, a favourite for Mary's robes. Monks switched to natural dyes made from boiled berries and bark. Their icons turned darker, more muted, like dreams remembered through fog. As the 8th century winds on, the tension doesn't break, it simmers. You feel it everywhere, in half-sung hymns, in empty niches, in the way artisans now carve crosses where faces used to be. And yet, even in this austerity, there is a certain beauty, clean lines, solemn chants, bare walls that echo every footstep like a prayer. As twilight falls, you return to the chapel where you first awoke. The monk is gone, but his icon remains. It is unfinished, but you notice something new. A single fleck of gold added to the halo since morning. Small, quiet, but present. You awaken on the deck of a ship. the hull creaking softly beneath you as the moonlight dances across the dark waters of the Bosphorus. The air is salt-laced and cold, but the crew moves silently, their eyes fixed forward, their hands steady on ropes and rudders. You sit among them, cloaked and still, feeling a quiet anticipation swirl in the night air. Suddenly, the silence is broken not by shouts, not by steel, but by fire. Not ordinary fire, though. This one hisses, roars, clings to the sea. A stream of flaming liquid shoots from the prow of a Byzantine dromon, arching like a comet across the sky and striking an enemy ship. The vessel erupts in flame, its wood shrieking before splintering apart. Other ships scatter, their sails flailing, panic rising. You watch from the shadows as the enemy fleet breaks and flees into the dark. This is the first time you witness Greek fire, the Empire's most infamous secret weapon. It burns on water. It cannot be doused. It is not simply a tool of war, it is a myth in the making. The formula is closely guarded, known only to a handful of specialists sworn to secrecy. You try to ask a young sailor about it later. He smiles softly and says, "The sea forgets. We don't." Historians have speculated for centuries, was it made from petroleum, pine resin, sulfur? None can say with certainty. Some even doubt the consistency of the tales, though the records are clear. Something terrible and flaming terrorized Arab and Slavic navies for generations. You return to shore by dawn, your cloak singed at the hem. Constantinople sleeps uneasily. It is now the late 7th century, and the empire is under siege again and again. Arab armies have advanced as far as the walls of the city, their fleets cutting through the Aegean. Yet, each time, Constantinople holds. Much of that resilience is thanks to these waters and to the fire that floats on them inside the city. Emperor Constantine IV walks the marble halls of the great palace, his face lined not with age, but with exhaustion. He negotiates, reorganizes, prays. You see him just once briefly, from the edge of the Senate chamber as he passes a map of the Aegean pinned with wax seals and feathered notes. His steps are slow, but his resolve is clear. After repelling the Arab siege of 678, Constantine negotiates a truce that brings a flicker of peace. It is fleeting near, of course, but even flickers matter here. He is one of many emperors now caught in a relentless cycle, diplomacy by day, defence by night. You wander the harbour district where boat builders hammer quietly under lantern light. In a tucked-away tavern, an old sailor tells tales of fire siphons mounted on ship prows, of oil mixed with saltpeter, of machines that gurgled like dragons. You suspect exaggeration. But then again, this is Byzantium, where even myths are built on scaffolding of truth. One detail stays with you during one siege. To keep up morale, the emperor supposedly had bread thrown over the city walls to mock the enemy's attempts to starve them. Whether or not it's true, the image delights you. Crusts of defiance sailing through the air, carried by pigeons and pride. Meanwhile, the iconoclast controversy continues to simmer. Now under a new generation of emperors, the church debates in whispers, and monks still paint in secret. You notice that the mosaics in public spaces grow simpler crosses, geometric designs, chalices. Faces are rarer, the walls are quieter, and yet the city remains full of life. In the early morning, you watch bakers knead dough with red clay beneath their fingernails. You pass a midwife washing linens in a public fountain. You overhear a boy reciting Homer in Greek so fluent it rolls like silk. The soul of Byzantium is not only found in its emperors or its weapons, it's in these small, ordinary continuities. Byzantium is shrinking in territory, yes, but it is growing in identity. Less Latin, more Greek, less Rome, more Romaioi, the name they now call themselves. Roman in legacy, but Eastern in heart. You return to the docks at sunset. The ships are quiet now, bobbing gently in the water. One still bears the darkened nozzle of a fire siphon, now capped and quiet. You stand beside it and think of how empires do not always roar. Sometimes they burn silently, with a flame that floats. Above you, the sky turns from rose to indigo, and the city lights flicker on like fireflies stitched to the marble coast. You sit down on a coil of rope and rest your head against a barrel of pitch, letting the waves rock you towards sleep. You awaken in the soft hush of morning within the labyrinthine halls of the great palace. Sunlight filters through coloured glass windows, casting fractured jewels of light on the marble floors. Somewhere in the distance, footsteps echo measured, deliberate, never hurried. Here, inside these palace walls, power moves not in thunderclaps, but in whispers. It is now the early 8th century, and while emperors still sit on the throne, you sense they are not always the ones pulling the strings. You stand in the corridor of painted ceilings and mosaic-strewn vestibules, watching a eunuch pass silently, a scroll tucked beneath his sleeve. His name is unknown to you, perhaps Basil, or Peter, or something softer, but you can tell from the way others step aside that he holds more influence than his title suggests. In the Byzantine court, eunuchs are no mere servants. They are advisors, diplomats, and power brokers trusted because they cannot form dynasties, feared because they often see everything. You follow one through a narrow covered walkway to a sunlit garden, where Empress Irene sits in careful contemplation. She does not look up, but her hand motions, and the eunuch kneels beside her, whispering into her ear. You recognize Irene, once a noble woman from Athens, now the real force behind the imperial throne. She married Emperor Leo IV, bore a son, and when he died young, she stepped into power first as regent, then, astonishingly, as emperor in her own right. Not emperor, Basileus. She even had coins minted with her face alone, wearing the lauros, the imperial regalia. You hold one in your palm later that evening, its ridged edge catching the lamplight, her gaze as cold and steady as the metal itself. And yes, that's another thing. She had her own son, Constantine the Great, blinded in a palace coup to retain power. The act is unspeakable, and yet, somehow, unsurprising in this place where velvet gloves often conceal iron hands. Historians still debate her motives. Was she protecting the empire from a weak ruler, or grasping power with tragic resolve? You wander the same marble halls and wonder yourself, despite the ruthlessness of politics. The palace is calm, almost serene. You spend a morning in the imperial library, watching scribes copy texts on medicine and astronomy, their fingers stained with ink and mulberry juice. One hums softly as he writes a passage about constellations. Another pauses to sketch a bird seen earlier in the garden, a glossy green parrot gifted from the east. Even here, in a court ruled by intrigue, beauty is not forgotten. You take a walk along the shaded corridor known as the Chrysotraklinos, the Golden Hall. Its walls shimmer with tiny glass tiles too small to seem impressive individually, but together they form scenes of coronations. celestial signs, and saints in halos. You pass a mosaic of Solomon, his crown tilting slightly as if caught in a breeze. The symbolism is clear. Byzantine emperors are not just rulers, they are stewards of God's order on earth. But you know, and everyone knows, that power is rarely so divine in its practice. Behind those shimmering walls lie rooms where eunuchs quietly exchange favours, where generals offer conditional loyalty, where foreign ambassadors are greeted with smiles and weighed like olives on a merchant scale. You watch a eunuch hand a silk pouch to a chamberlain and wonder what's inside gold, a message, or perhaps a threat disguised as a gift. One detail lingers in your mind when Irene ruled. She once considered marrying Charlemagne, the newly crowned emperor of the West, a union of East and West, old Rome and new Rome, forged through marriage. It never happened. Of course, perhaps because of political resistance or mutual suspicion, but just imagining the candlelit meeting of those two colossal figures, each cloaked in velvet and ambition, fills your mind with quiet possibilities. Evening settles in slowly. You're now outside the palace, seated beside a small fountain in the courtyard. A servant ladles water into stone basins for birds. Two guards play a silent game with bone-carved dice. Overhead, a frayed banner flutters lazily in the wind, its purple fading, but still proud. And in this moment, you understand the Byzantine Empire survives not just through military strength or economic might. It survives through choreography, through ritual, through roles played carefully in rooms filled with incense and secrets. Power here is rarely shouted. It is whispered behind latticed screens, written on folded parchment, and carried in the silence between footsteps. You lean back against the cool stone, the sounds of the city far below softened by the palace's gentle hush. The stars begin to prick the sky, and the warm light from 1,000 lamps spills from windows behind gauzy curtains. Somewhere, deep inside the palace, decisions are being made. But not tonight. Not by you. You close your eyes,